Hello everyone, this is JPL, and I'm joined with...
Matthew.
And Tilla.
And we are the Council of the podcast Name in the Brackets. Today's topic will be our top 5 favorite movies of all time. And these include franchises as one point if we have trouble finding out from which one of those we want on the list. And so, yeah, franchises, stuff like that, all in one list. How this thing normally goes is that we go through number 5, 4, 3, 2... and 1, that's a number as well. And, yeah, we each do that. So let's start. Okay. So, alright. My number 5 is Indiana Jones. The reason why this is because it's nostalgic. I've watched this when I was much younger. Oddly enough, my first one was The Crystal Skull. One that's hated by a lot of people, but I don't mind it. I really enjoyed it. It's pretty fun. It's my mother's favorite, but if I were to pick one from this whole series that'd be my best, it'd probably be the first one. It's a classic. It's fantastic. I love Harrison Ford in it. It's just a fantastic adventure story and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very well-made movies for the most part. Excluding the even-numbered ones, of course. And, yeah, worth checking out. Fun fact, I believe the first one, at least, was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, good series. Well acted, well put together. Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't really argue with it.
Very enjoyable. Would recommend it. For kids,
Yeah.
probably...
Yeah, except maybe...
Older kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, around like the ages of 10, I would say.
Yeah, at least.
That's a good...
That's probably a good range.
That's a good time for...
For a face-melting good time.
Just for clarification, are you including Crystal Skull into...
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure kids would love it. I bet they would.
Okay.
Oh, and it's the series that invented the PG-13 rating.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a whole story behind that we probably shouldn't get into.
But
Alright.
yeah, go research that.
Okay.
Okay, my number 5 is a recent movie, Manchester by the Sea. And it was sort of a big Oscar-type movie this year and last year. And the premise is it's about this guy and his brother dies, so he has to take care of his nephew and move back to the town where some very sad things happen to him. So he's sort of dealing with the grief of losing his brother and dealing with past griefs, which I won't spoil. And it's a really interesting film. It's sort of an examination of how men sort of communicate emotion and how they communicate in general. Where a lot of movies derive conflict from, like there's this big bad guy or there's something we have to overcome. This movie, each conversation is a conflict within itself where the characters are, arguing and shouting and talking over each other, trying to win the conversation. And yeah, it's a really interesting movie to watch. Sometimes it's very sad, sometimes it's very happy. It's almost like someone took a camera and filmed these events as they were happening in real life. Very well acted, very well written.
Yeah, I saw it. I was very bored throughout the entire thing. The only thing that I really enjoyed is just having a drinking game for every time there was swearing, drink a thing of Kool-Aid, which we ran out of Kool-Aid before the end of the movie, so there is a lot of swearing. Would not show this to your kids. One of my complaints is that I felt like there wasn't enough chemistry between the two main characters for the whole climax at the end to be as powerful or realistic for me. Because I felt like they just put it there so they can finally end this thing. But I don't really feel like there was anything to actually lead to that. They didn't really have much interaction that would promote that.
Yeah. It is interesting to note the movie doesn't really have an ending. it's kind of like real life in that it doesn't end. It has a direction that it could be going, but it's really open to interpretation. And yeah, I appreciated that, and it's very realistic. All of the acting is, I think, incredible. Yeah, it transports you into this world, and you can laugh, you can feel very sad, and yeah.
I wouldn't know. Anyways, my fifth is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's funny, and it's put together very intentionally, and just how everything works together. The ending is probably the most anticlimactic ending to any movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody could top that and still have it be a good movie. Yeah, it's... Most of my list is comprised of movies that I would watch again in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And this is something that Monty Python is... Well, specifically, The Holy Grail is a movie that I could watch with friends just about any time. Just because it's fun to laugh at and make fun of it and each other, and yeah, it's just it's a good movie just to sit back and relax. It's not something necessarily deep, but there are bits of humor that go deeper than some modern humor.
It's probably one of the most quotable movies you can have out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of famous quotes.
Sort of the classic.
Even just quoting a whole scene is very
Yes.
common for this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it does have some mature humor in it at some points, and so I probably wouldn't show this to your kids. Exactly.
I like how we've sort of become the kids reviewers as well. We're just like, which movies are appropriate for kids.
I mean,
But yeah.
this is the only one on my list that is actually less appropriate for kids. Everything else, yeah, go for it. But yeah, I don't know. This one's...
Monty Python is really good, and yeah, it's sort of the classic surrealist comedy. One of those movies that, people who were in college when it came out, they sort of quoted it, made it this huge success, and now it's sort of been passed down through the generations. It's worth it if you could get your hands on the special edition DVD. There are some very hilarious bonus features. For example, the subtitles for people who didn't like the movie, taken from King Henry V.
It's one of those movies that doesn't take itself seriously. And even, I know, for instance, Deadpool was, people really enjoyed it for a lot of different reasons, but, for instance, the opening credits for Monty Python and the Holy Grail,
Oh, yeah.
they're not just replacements of names with funny things. They're a whole joke in and of themselves over and over again for about, 5-10 minutes?
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
You just want the movie to start, but you just have to go through this whole secret history that's going on where the person doing the intro gets sacked several times.
I will say it is, at times, a more fun movie to quote than to watch. There isn't a lot of story. There isn't a lot of character.
True.
It's... Yeah, if you've seen it enough times that you almost don't need to see it again because you can quote everything funny, and
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good movie.
Alright, on to number 4.
Okay, so my number 4 would be the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Fantastic story. It's very long, very, very long. I'm more specifically talking about the extended versions. It adds a lot of it. Some parts become longer and slower because of it. But as a whole experience, it's very cinematic, very fantastic. A story of good and evil, trying to overcome evil, and just the beautiful love story of Aragorn and his horse.
Yep. I think it's also important to point out that it's not... as a kid I didn't realize this, but the more... we just recently watched this together. I realize it's not as much. It definitely is a story of good and evil, but it's more of a battle within each person than it is a physical battle. Because while they are going to war, at the same time, the different armies of men are wondering, hey, should I trust these people? Same with the elves. Should we trust the elves? But as it goes on, you kind of see that, like, good isn't triumphed by just going and fighting. In fact, the way they won was arguably pretty peaceful. It just took a long way to get there and was very, very hard to do. So, overall, I'm a huge fan of Tolkien, so I love the trilogy. Of books, especially. The movies were good. It's probably one of the best film adaptations to books that I think I've seen.
Yeah. And it's as movies, they also function very well just as movies. You don't need to have read the books to understand them, and there's just this whole universe, and you can get involved in it. And I have more comments, but I will bring those up later. Yeah. It is also worth noting that Tolkien is really one of the key authors who, in the 20th century, fiction and fantasy were seen as these very childish genres, and he's one of the people who helped elevate it to something that could actually mean something and be important.
I would definitely recommend this trilogy. Probably even to your slightly older kids, like 7, 8, around that time area. Maybe more so the theatrical versions, because extended could be really long and boring at times. But would recommend it. Probably watch it with them for the final movie.
Yeah, I would say the first one is especially good for them. My rule for my family, and I know that's pretty common, but is to read the books first before you see the movie. I think that's a good way to do The Lord of the Rings. But at the same time, I think I still could have enjoyed them as a kid without having read them. But I think there's a little bit of a deeper appreciation when you read them first. They can be long and overly descriptive at times, but Tolkien was not just trying to set up a story, he was trying to set up a history for his fantasy world. So in that, I have a lot of respect for him.
And it is also another thing worth noting, the extended editions, unlike some recent films, they aren't necessary, so you can still watch the theatrical editions and you'll get the same story, and yet the extended editions add, I think it's almost 2 hours of extra footage to the entire trilogy, and it isn't, none of it is really necessary for the story, but it adds that sort of depth. So if you're willing to jump into that 12-hour endeavor, then it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, we had a good long day with Aragorn and his horse.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Okay, my number 4 is Blade Runner, and this is sort of the movie that invented the cyberpunk subgenre. And it's a really interesting film, just the story behind it. One of the most difficult making of experiences, and Harrison Ford said he absolutely hated working on the film, and it was released and the studio had edited it, chopped it all up, put a nice happy ending at the end, and it was a huge flop. Then the director's cut came out and people started to see what the movie actually was, which is, it's this like grimy and yet beautiful tale of the future and of what it means to be human and memory and all of these things. And it's an interesting movie. It's very dreamlike. So especially with the score and the visuals, there are just scenes that sort of lull you in, and sometimes it's even hard to stay awake just because it's so dreamlike. And yet it's also, there are moments of excitement, and it's just very, very well made. Really good production design, a lot of great special effects, and I think it holds up pretty well. I recommend the final edition, which came out in 2007, and that's sort of been the definitive version of the film since then. Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
Neither have I. I've seen trailers for it, and I've seen some commentary on it. Overall, I think it's an interesting concept. I've always loved the cyberpunk genre. So yeah, I already immediately like it for that. Yeah, I don't know. I can't say too much without having seen it, so.
Yeah. I will comment on the sequel. I don't usually mind sequels, especially, this one is supposed to be a continuation. The problem, though, is that the ending to the original is ambiguous, but it's in a very good way, that it doesn't really answer all of the questions about the characters. So I'm kind of a little bit sad that they're bringing back Harrison Ford's character and not leaving that ambiguous ending, but I am very much looking forward to exploring the world a bit more and seeing a different director take on what's his vision of the Blade Runner universe.
Okay.
I just want to make a comment before I move on, but Harrison Ford is an actor that is on all of our top 5.
Yes.
I just want to point that out. Anyways, as I continue, next movie doesn't have Harrison Ford, but my next movie is Bionicle, the trilogy, specifically Bionicle 2.
Yeah.
The first one is good, but it's not great, and we are more invested in the Matoran than we are the Toa, which is fine. But as a kid, I always wanted to learn about the heroes.
Yeah.
And Bionicle 2 does that really well in showing the progression from Matoran to Toa, or from villager to hero, if you haven't seen Bionicle. But this is probably one of the better movies. Chronologically, this is the first movie in the timeline. By release, it's obviously the second. But it does aspects of every Bionicle movie, but it does it best. And then it shows the progression of a reluctant hero to a full-on hero, and then through a different sort of hero. In the way it ends, it isn't that they're giving up their lives for others, but they are giving up a lot to save others. It does tackle some interesting concepts of deism in some ways, in the struggle between could Makuta really become as great as Mad Nui, and the whole series altogether kind of struggles with that. But overall, great story. Also, the first movie that we really get to see the Toa's mask powers.
Yeah.
We saw them slightly in the previous movie, but it wasn't enough, I think. I think if you're going to start on any Bionicle movie, it should be Bionicle 2, because it starts with new characters different from Bionicle 1. And it ends wrapping up a lot, but it leaves you wanting more. The third movie kind of gives a little bit more detail. It isn't really as necessary to the canon of Bionicle. That being said, it's the first one I watched, so it'll still have a place in my heart.
Yeah.
And then, again, the first movie is good, but character-wise, it leaves us hanging. It really focuses on the two main Matoran, and not so much the 6 Toa.
I would say that the first movie was made more for the fans already invested in Bionicle and all their characters, and so the main heroes of the story, they were already introduced,
Yeah.
and so you got to know more of the side heroes.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, Bionicle. It's one of those series that, as I was younger, I would rewatch probably almost every day for the longest time. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the characters, especially if you grew up with the sets,
Yeah.
like that were in the movies. It was really cool just to like, oh yeah, play with them while you're watching the movie.
Yeah.
Recreate scenes. Probably, if you were to be introduced into Bionicle and were very reluctant because it is a large universe with a bunch of history,
Yeah.
which you can find through the books. But I think the movies give the main thing.
Yeah. The big thing about the movies is that, so Bionicle 2 starts us at a starting point. Bionicle 1 starts us partway through a series. And Bionicle 4, which is kind of separate, but The Legend Reborn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Starts us at like the very end. And it has some good beginning points to it, but you really do need to know about the world before you watch it. Whereas Bionicle 2 is one that you can learn more about as you watch it.
Yeah.
The movies are kind of an advertisement for the whole series. So I would say if you enjoy aspects of the second movie, you will probably enjoy the entire series. That being said, obviously, it's a movie series made for children for the purpose of selling more toys. So obviously there are probably going to be some corners that were cut along the way, and I would say the biggest places that Bionicle 2 falls short is the animation. While it's good, the fourth Bionicle movie does beat it in that.
It was very good at its time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But nowadays it may not hold up as well. It is also very cheesy in a lot of parts.
Yeah.
The bad guy is very much a bad guy and definitely evil, and there's no question in that. But there is a twist into who the bad guy is. So
yeah,
it was just something that as a kid I grew up with and I loved. Yeah.
All right, on to number 3. So my number 3 is a much more recent movie. Came out a few years ago, and that is Interstellar. I was really amazed by the quality of this movie and the overall story. And it's a movie that has one complete story. It's very long, very thought-inducing. Cinematically, it's beautiful. Lots of crazy space stuff and all of that. I would definitely recommend it. It's beautifully done, yeah, and acted as well.
I really enjoyed this one as well. It didn't make my list, but it's sort of, the way I would describe it is, it's almost like taking a car ride through a cornfield during the night when you can see all of these stars, and it has that very like grounded on Earth feel to it, and yet there's also this heavenly space feel to it, and it's a really unique movie. I do think the ending falls a bit short. I think if you stop watching the movie 20 minutes before it ends, you'll enjoy it a whole lot more, but everything leading up to that is just beautifully done. There's some really good tension. The music is really good, if at times a bit repetitive. The tone, all of the special effects, it all comes together to make this really good movie.
So the ending, I had no problems with it. I think it was a very cool idea. But one thing is that it's a movie that you should be open-minded towards. Don't be like, very negative towards all the miscalculations that are done. Especially near the end where things don't really add up to our modern science.
Yeah, it takes... For the most part, the movie is very scientifically accurate as of 2014. However, the ending is takes a lot of liberties, and
It's more science fiction than...
Yeah.
and it has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I definitely think it was a little bit Shyamalan-esque, but it didn't ruin the movie for me, and if you can sort of look past the ending, then it's a really well-made movie.
Yeah, very, very well done.
It's interesting because it plays with ideas that the general public watching the movie might not think when it comes to science, like different forms of how time works, for instance, and how space in general works, what a black hole actually looks like according to what we know about black holes now. So it's very educational, if nothing else. I haven't seen the movie, but I know I've been watching through, for instance, Cosmos by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he brings up a lot of things that I've seen people comment about Interstellar, and I realized a couple different things that were actually true about it. But it's another thing that's on my list to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that this movie probably has the best score from Hans Zimmer that I've heard. That and Inception.
And really great cameo by a certain actor who, if you've seen him in other movies, the cameo will be very surprising. And it has one of the coolest, I don't want to say jump scare, but it kind of is in a movie, in that it doesn't use a loud sound. Instead, it uses silence.
Because there is no sound in space.
Yeah, so it's... and it's a really great... just the artistry of it, and even with the final 20 minutes of the movie, it's still a very well-made film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, my number 3 is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which it came out, the fans of the comic book it's based on had demanded this movie. It came out, debuted in 5th place at the box office, complete failure, but it sort of gained a really big following, and I really loved this movie. I mean, it's style over substance, and yet the style is so well done that it adds substance to the movie. So it's probably the most in-depth film in terms of mythology that I've seen for the amount of time it takes. It's about 2 hours long, and yet you learn so much about each of these characters, and it's just the tiniest of details. One of the first scenes in the movie is the main character Scott talking to Ramona, his crush, and you can see on the wall behind him there's a light switch, but it's really high up, out of reach, and so it's sort of visually telling you their relationship, how she's on a different level than him and how he can't reach her. And the whole movie is full of this foreshadowing and character details, and each time I watch it I actually find something new in the background or something that adds to these characters in the story. And it's also hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw it, but I didn't really get into it. It's not a movie that I really enjoyed, but I would say it's something I would recommend to others, because I'm sure others would enjoy it.
Yeah, I would say it's, in its special effects, it is visually entertaining and visually humorous. In just a lot of things that happen. It's over the top, and it's funny, and it's a fun movie to watch. That being said, I could see why it's not really for everybody either. It's a good movie, I will give it that, and it has some really good actors and actresses in it. But that being said, it's got its faults. It's not on my list, but it's still a movie that I would definitely, if somebody were to ask if I wanted to watch it, I would say yes.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I know the humor style is a little bit off for some people, and it depends on what you go to see movies for. So if you go to see movies to learn a lesson or to feel these strong emotions, you'll be very disappointed. But if you go to movies to have fun, Scott Pilgrim is actually an incredible movie for that. And it actually does have these deeper messages, but you have to watch it a few times to catch them. So, for example, from what I've been able to tell, it's sort of a love letter and a criticism of millennial culture, sort of this self-obsession while also self-deprecating and full of action, hilarious action. Yeah, it's really well made, really well acted. The actors are all over the top enough to fit in with the movie, and yet there's subtleties in their performances that when you catch on, you can really tell a lot about their characters. And yeah, even though it's 2 hours, it is super dense in all of the stuff that it gets in, and all of the things, the little details that you can figure out about the characters and who they are.
Yeah. Alright, so my number 3 is... Okay. It takes a little bit of explanation. Because I was originally just going to put the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But I generally like books, or movies that are based on books, more when they follow the book as much as possible while still making it entertaining. And of the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, the first one follows the book the best, I would say. That being said, the first one is rather slow in comparison. The second one is also rather slow. And then The Return of the King is very fast-paced, lots of action, very intense. So overall, the trilogy is decently unbalanced, not as unbalanced as some Hunger Games. But it's... I don't know. It's still a good trilogy. That being said, I think one that puts a lot of the action and silliness and fun together was the first Hobbit movie. The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. And that's... They took characters that I loved from the book and they put them on a screen. And for me, this was again the first Lord of the Rings movie that I'd seen on a big screen. So for me, that was super important.
Yeah.
But also, as a movie in general, it's just a very fun movie. It takes itself seriously, but not so seriously. And it has a clear couple messages to it that you can get by watching it. I feel like the level of action that it has is enough, even for a book that is almost entirely walking. That being said, the 2 following movies to The Hobbit are average at best. They do well, and they're fun to watch, but they do have their problems, and I would say neither of the sequels to the original Hobbit are better than any of the movies in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So, that being said, The Hobbit is definitely my favorite. After that, probably Return of the King, and then Fellowship. But the series as a whole is a very good series, very good universe. That I just love.
Yeah, The Hobbit, I think the first one is my favorite of the trilogy, because it's honestly just a lot of fun, like very cheery, even in dark places. Mm-hmm. They're not too serious enough where they can't just stop and have a musical number and have a great time with it. My only complaint is that it's not as practical as the Lord of the Rings was. They use a lot more CGI, especially for the orcs. They're no longer a person in a costume. The sets are mostly green screen. They're no longer going through New Zealand and actually on set. And And so you don't have the biggest immersive experience for that point. However, it's still a really fun movie, and it follows the first one follows the book more closely than the other ones.
I will say, as someone who isn't quite as much of a book purist, I thought the first Hobbit was good a few times, but then the first 40 minutes of the movie are just so slow that I can't really recommend you watch that one more than once. And I think the second one does a little bit better job of being a movie, but at the same time there's just so much silliness that even though that's my favorite of the trilogy, it also contains some of my least favorite moments. And yeah, and then the last Hobbit movie is just poorly made, and I think from most of the people that I've talked to, if you enjoy the books in general more than the films, then you'll like the first Hobbit the most. If you enjoy the films and haven't read the books, or you think they're about on the same level, then you'll probably enjoy the second Hobbit most. And if you like over-the-top battles and orcs dying and nothing else, then you'll like the third.
My biggest point that I would say for this is like the first Hobbit is the one that stays truest to its plot. They have a goal, they have a reluctant hero, and I mean they're trying to go slay a dragon to get back gold. It's a simple tale, and the whole tale is about it being more about the journey than the destination. What the sequels do is they basically just ruin that, with the second one ending without the killing of Smaug, and then the first one beginning with it. It just makes that whole part of their journey useless, pretty much. They had been hyping themselves up for a giant dragon fight at the end, and at the end, there wasn't one.
Well, the second two movies were more of a filler type thing, where the first one, it was a story of the first half of the book.
Yeah.
Well, the second two, they decided, hey, we need more movies, so let's just add a bunch of filler of the second half.
Yeah.
I have heard rumors of a 4-hour cut of the Hobbit movies that's supposed to improve it, following the book a bit better. I haven't seen it yet, but I have a feeling that if they had actually made a 4-hour movie, or maybe 2.5-hour movies, it would have been much better.
Yeah.
As a series.
Okay.
All right.
Number two?
Number two.
Okay. So, my number two would be, well, Batman. And now, I know Batman is just, there's a lot of franchises, lots of trilogies, and they're all very good, but the one that I more specifically want to put on my list is the animated Dark Knight Returns. The deluxe edition, where they added the first part and two-part together. It's very... I just love the whole story of having an old Batman, an old Bruce Wayne, returning to his mantle. He's fighting crime, but you still have him being old and not as fast as he was, so he has to do things differently. And I will say, for a PG-13 movie, it is more rated R than the current rated R DC movies. It's a lot more gory, a lot more dark than the other movies, and I think it just did a really good job at making the Dark Knight Returns comic book into an animated movie. It's very well animated. It's in between the lines of the whole anime and animation-esque, which it's something I really like. Beautifully animated. I honestly just really love the score. Christopher Drake does a fantastic job with this movie, and yeah, very good.
I've seen The Dark Knight Returns. I've seen, I think, most of the Batman movies, and yeah, as a series, it's all, for the most part, very good. Batman is a very interesting character. There are a lot of interpretations of him. My favorite being The Dark Knight. But, yeah, I mean, he's sort of an interesting superhero. He's become, he's up with Superman and Spider-Man as the most iconic superheroes. And, I don't know. He's not usually my favorite because he's a little bit depressed and all of that kind of stuff for me. But I do think a lot of people sort of feel that, like, pessimism or realism, and they relate to that. And yeah, he's a very interesting character, a lot of interpretations, some hilarious, some very dark and depressing. And yeah, if you haven't seen a Batman movie before, do yourself a favor.
Yeah.
I think for me, that really got this to be one of my favorites is my second viewing of it. I viewed it the first time, and it was kind of dark for me. I was like, I don't know, this is kind of too dark. Pretty weird having an old Batman. But then I watched it a second time, and I just loved how everything fit together, how everything worked. The Joker, while he's not voiced by Mark Hamill, the actor for him does a very fantastic job at doing a very evil and creepy Joker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, my number 2 is Inception. And this is like a really special movie in that it sort of changed the way that action movies are made in general. And it's Christopher Nolan's follow-up to The Dark Knight. And for those who don't know already, it's about people who go inside other people's dreams and sort of try to steal ideas from them. And so it's like a crime movie, but it's also action, and there's also surreal dream sequences and, zero gravity, vans falling off a bridge in slow motion. And the acting is incredible. Like, you have Leonardo DiCaprio in one of his best roles, and as this father who's trying to get back to his kids, and he has to do these jobs to do that. And you have a bunch of really respected actors doing really good performances. You have incredible visual effects, some really surreal sequences. And then when you watch the making of, it's even cooler because you find out that a lot of it was practical, actually turning a hallway, building a special set for that scene, or putting a freight train sort of design over top of a truck and driving it through an intersection, and all of these crazy, huge, big practical effects that make this movie so much better.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's very visually stunning. A fantastic music score. The science behind it, I'm not sure if that's realistic entirely.
No, not
but
really.
it's really cool to watch. I would recommend it. Very fun, very thought provoking. But for me, it is kind of falls for the story a bit because there's not that much of a story to it. You're more there for the experience of being within the dream, of having the main character. I'm rooting for him so that he can be reunited with his kids, and instead of actually there being, oh hey, let's corrupt a business of some sort. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
very weird, very strange, but it's still really fun to watch. Would recommend it.
And you have to watch it a few times to understand what's going on.
Yeah, this is a very deep and thought-provoking movie, and it's not really one that you want to watch if you're just looking for a fun, happy time. Although it's not necessarily dark and depressing. It fits in that middle ground pretty well. It really does play off of the idea of dreams, and especially dreams in related to media too, and just in how anybody takes in information. And it throws you off guard a couple times in just several things that it does that you may not expect. And it does something that a lot of good movies do, in that it leaves you hanging, but it doesn't make a sequel.
Yeah.
A sequel would probably ruin it.
Yeah.
So,
and it's just such a unique concept, and they really take it and run with it, and dreams inside of dreams, what's happening to time, what's going on, and it's just so cool to watch it unfold. And you do have to watch it multiple times to understand it, but you will not regret watching it multiple times, most likely.
Yeah.
Unless you are not a fan of deep thinking movies.
Or unless you have like a final to do the next day and
Oh.
you're watching Inception instead.
Yeah, very bad idea.
All right.
Alright, so my next movie, I'm kind of copping out in the way I did The Hobbit, in that I'm listing the whole series but specifying one. Star Wars, I think, especially the original trilogy, is cinematically brilliant. Even with its weird parts, it set up the sci-fi genre really, really well for movies. It's inspirational. It created, basically single-handedly created geek culture. But I think the one that's most near and dear to me is probably Star Wars 7, even though cinematically it's beautiful, first off. Like, the graphics are great. The fights are well done. There's a good mix of action versus non-action. But it definitely has its flaws. Someone pointed out to me that the actress for Rey only has one expression on her face the entire movie. That kind of ruined it for me, but he wasn't wrong. That being said, if I was in the universe of Star Wars, I would probably have a similar shocked face the entire movie. But there were problems that I definitely had with this movie that I didn't have with previous movies. I think cinematically, as a viewing experience, either the fourth or the fifth Star Wars is the best. That is A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back for people who number things weirdly, or don't know how to count. Like, apparently most of JPL's fan base is.
I just like to make fun
good.
of.
Good.
People.
I mean, I guess you are teaching them how to count, so I shouldn't judge them. No, but I think those are better movies, but I think I enjoyed myself more watching Episode 7. Simply because, it's a rehash of 4. And I think overall I enjoy 4 most as a movie, but as an experience, I enjoyed 7 in that it's a story that is continuing in a direction that I don't know where it's going to go yet. I have predictions and I have thoughts in my head, but I don't know yet. New characters, new story. The visuals are great. Harrison Ford. And he does. I mean, obviously, he does an amazing job. He has some really good lines in there, and he pulls it off well. Just it's a good movie experience, and I'm putting it above Rogue One because Rogue One was a really, really good movie, but it wasn't really necessary to the overall story of Star Wars. And I think that's another problem with any of the other prequels, is that they stray from the actual narrative of Star Wars. And they do a good job of setting up a good history for what happened, but I think a large part of Star Wars focuses around Luke and focuses around the Jedi especially. Rogue One does a really good job of being a side story where we get to look deeper into the lore of Star Wars and different perspectives of it. And it has some really good action, really good, again, non-action. But all that being said, when I think of Star Wars, I distinguish it from other sci-fi genres in that it's not just sci-fi, it is very much sci-fi fantasy, and that there's this whole force that people can call upon to do space magic, basically. And I think that's a cool idea. It's a fun blend of sci-fi and fantasy. And I think The Force Awakens does a good job of that. Does it have its problems? Absolutely. It is Star Wars Episode 4, but newer. But I enjoyed the modernization of Episode 4.
So for me, I can't really say anything about Star Wars Episode 7 because I don't know what the whole story is for the new trilogy. I don't know the story of the new trilogy, so I don't really have a way to just say anything against the whole story, beginning part of it. So I'm sure I will have a whole thing. I will decide my mind on it once the next two movies come out, but for now I have nothing to it. The only thing I would say against it is that it's not part of George Lucas's original design.
Yeah.
When he was making it. I do feel like they should have at least taken a look at what he did and probably done something similar, because it was his idea, his work, that they just took away and say, hey, no, we're going to do our own thing. Sorry, you made one too many mistakes for us. Like, maybe if he was just there saying, this is the basic story, go ahead and do that, but not actually have him be the director.
Yeah. I think he falls into a similar problem that a lot of very successful directors fall into, in that I think they get a little bit too obsessed or think too highly of themselves, and so they say, well, whatever I do, people will enjoy it, so I will do what I want to do. And sometimes it works out fine, sometimes you end up with, Senate hearings in your sci-fi action film.
Well, that's not that bad. When you're a kid, that's kind of the boring part of the movie.
Well, yeah.
But once you understand politics,
I do
roughly,
think it is. Star Wars is an interesting franchise in that, what happens, I think, with directors, and you can see this in Star Wars, you see it a little bit in the Middle-earth movies, is that when you have one director who's working on all of these and very involved, the director doesn't necessarily want to do the same thing for their entire life, so they try to change the franchise up. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think Star Wars, sometimes it succeeded very much with changing up the formula, and sometimes it didn't. And when you have a director, it's kind of nice to say to the director, okay, you've done a very good job, now you have enough credit and you can go make your own ideas that don't have to connect to the movies.
Yeah. I think I brought this up with my discussion on Avatar versus Korra, but with the Avatar franchise, there were the main story writers, most people just call them Break, two guys that came up with the story for Avatar, were not the ones that wrote most of the individual episodes. I think they did a really good job coming up with the whole grand story, but as they became individual episode writers in Legend of Korra, you get to see that, okay, well, they didn't really develop characters as much as ideas for characters. The writers for the original Avatar series did a really, really good job. I wish they would have kept writers like that on. And I think as JPL mentioned, if we had Star Wars, where Lucas came up with the ideas and was still part of that creative process, but wasn't necessarily the final decision or the person who dealt with all the minute details, I think it would be an interesting...
And yeah, that was basically Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
He handed it to someone else because he didn't want the stress of it all. And gave him the basic story. And they did a very fantastic job.
Mm-hmm.
Which probably go to my number one. My number one is still in the category of Star Wars. Star Wars as a whole, for me, it's very difficult to accurately just rate it, because I feel like people don't have a full grasp on the person and how they would rate it in general. So for rating Star Wars, it's almost impossible, because I love Star Wars equally. And this is including Ewok films and the holiday special. I really enjoyed those. But if I were to choose one above everyone else, I would have to say Revenge of the Sith. And one reason why that is because it was my very first Star Wars movie that I ever watched, and I watched it in theaters. And it was very action-packed, very cool, very creative. Lots of designs, lots of fighting, and stuff like that for a kid like me, like a 7-year-old, that was like very appealing, like very, oh, cool. And I would rewatch it all the time, almost every day as a kid. And you know, it's a big bias, you know, because it's very nostalgic for me. It's hard for me to say anything bad about it because, hey, I remember it being the best thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand all the problems with the Star Wars prequels. I know what they are. I kind of agree with some people, but I still loved it because it gave it its own personality. It was different. Yeah, there were plot holes, kind of stupid things, but I loved them. And, yeah.
I'll add my comments on Star Wars. None of the movies really made my list, and I wasn't doing, based on franchise. I was trying to pick individual films, and none of the individual films really stand out to me as like a great movie, but then you get the whole franchise together, and that's when it really starts to become something special. And I think as individual movies, there are better ones, there are worse ones, but as a franchise, it's a really well-made one, very unique, a lot of really great ideas in it. It was my dad's first movie was Star Wars Episode 4. That was the one he went to the theater with his aunts and really fell in love with that universe. And then my first movie in the theater when I was 3 months old was Star Wars Episode 1. And so it's been a big part of me growing up and the family tradition. And it was really cool going to see Episode 7, opening night. Everything that happened got a reaction. And there were a lot of laughs, a few sobs, a few ahs. Everything BB-8 got a very big reaction. And yeah, there's such a huge fan base behind it, and you can see it's the quintessential American franchise. A small farm boy goes and saves the galaxy from the evil empire. And yeah, it's become sort of an inspiration to people, not only in the US but also around the world.
I will say that if you have the chance to watch a Star Wars movie in the theater, I would definitely recommend it. It's a different experience watching it in a big screen, especially if you have a whole filled up theater with a crowd cheering on. There's a energy to it, and it's much better than watching it on your own on the TV.
Yeah.
Well, you still have a good experience. It's not as
fanatical.
Yes, fanatical. as it would be on a big screen.
Yeah, it is really fun to enjoy a Star Wars movie with a bunch of other fans of the series, because I think a large part of it is you realize how similar you are to the other people, in that you're likely having the same reaction to the moment that's happening on screen, whether you expressed out loud or not. May be different, but it's just like a theater full of people who are feeling very similar things, and that nostalgia and excitement all rub off on everybody else in there. It's just a very fun experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my number one movie is The Return of the King, and that's sort of standing in for the rest of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I do think it is the strongest entrance in the series. While it has the most flaws, it also has the most triumphs. And this is a really great series. Like, I grew up with Star Wars, but I also sort of grew up with Lord of the Rings. I remember before I could watch the movies, I would read my mom's making of books, and I loved just seeing this universe. And then I finally got to watch it probably when I was in 4th grade or something, and it was just so much fun. My whole family is a huge fans of this series. My dad rereads the books at least once a year, and we rewatch the movies at least once a year. I've seen them more times than I can count, to the point where I have to start making jokes and all of that kind of stuff to keep interested, because I've seen it so many times I have it memorized. And
Yeah.
it's just so much fun, and it's sort of the best fantasy series unobjectively, because it's the most successful financially. One of the first movies to make over $1 billion at the box office, and it also has a whole bunch of Oscar nominations it wins. It was, I believe, the first fantasy movie to win the Best Picture Oscar, and a bunch of special effects wins, and the special effects still hold up. It's really fun to hear all of the making of stories, and yeah, there's just a lot of love went into making these movies, and you can see it on screen. You see the passion to tell this story, and it brings you in, and you can overlook the flaws because everything else is so good.
Yeah, I would say it had one of the turning point on Aragorn's relationship with his horse. This is an inside joke, everyone. Sorry if you're really confused.
There's just the scene with the horse and the water. Just watch it.
Yeah.
Never mind. Anyways, yeah, no, great movie. Most action of the Lord of the Rings movies, and like, I don't know, just the series in general is so good at pulling you into the world. Like, you believe that this whole world is real, and part of that is definitely Tolkien, but a large part of that is also Peter Jackson. I think them working together, even though they weren't alive at the same time, I think is just really cool. Like, you look at even just the little details on the armor for each of the characters, and it's crazy how much, I think Matt said, love was put into this movie. Just, it's so detailed and so good that I watched it for the first time just a few days ago, and I was not disappointed in the slightest.
Yes, it's very incredible. The CGI still holds up if you're worried about that. I think it actually looks better than The Hobbit CGI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more realistic.
If you thought that The Hobbit was a little too over the top for you, Lord of the Rings is more dark, a little grittier. The story has more of an impact. And there are flaws, but the reason that you see the flaws is that you've seen the movie so many times.
Right.
So you'll hear people complain about it, but for the most part, those complaints are everyone has seen it so often that your mind latches on those small details, and yet you still can't help but really enjoy all of these movies. Yeah. I can't really suggest you marathon them, though, because... Especially not if it's the first time. Because they're long, sometimes a little over long, and... Yeah, it can be a little bit difficult to get through them.
I would say at least once in your lifetime marathon the 3 movies.
Yeah. Extended edition.
If you're a fan.
And probably, if you are a super fan, The Hobbit plus Lord of the Rings marathon. Take a whole day.
Yeah, see, if you do that, though, like, it's a good idea because, like, The Hobbit starts out nice and fun and stuff, and by the end of it, it becomes a comedy. And then you get into the more serious stuff. So, like, about halfway through the day, you're like, haha, this is funny. And then you're like, okay, now it's time for serious stuff.
Yeah.
It's a nice transition.
Yeah. Just for the heck of it.
And since we've been talking a bit about how it adapts from the books, I do think The Return of the King makes the best changes to the book. And, yeah, I could make, like, a whole 2-hour video explaining why. This is, interestingly, the only movie on my list that I will skip scenes from, mostly because I do not like Shelob, and so I skip pretty much all of those scenes every time that I watch it if I'm not watching it with anyone else. But, yeah, I mean, the fact that I skip those scenes, that is actually physically repulsive, and I can't watch those scenes, is just a testament to how much these movies draw you in.
Yeah.
Alright, I guess I'm last here. So my favorite movie of all time, it kind of works with its sequel, but preferably the original Tron. I watched it again in just this past year, and I think of all movies, it immerses me best in that it has a lot that it doesn't show you. And I think that's really, really good. Like, it lets your imagination wander, and it doesn't really set that many rules for itself, but it also doesn't leave itself wide open to anything. The first Tron movie is a little slow, but that being said, the graphics at the time were amazing, frankly, and pretty much all done by hand, so very impressive. But I don't know, I like the idea of a cyber world where programs come to life. The whole atmosphere of the inner workings of a computer, and how, like, for instance, how light works is that there's no light except for through constructs, whether that be buildings or programs or disks or light cycles or whatever. That's where the light comes from. It's not from the sky, it's from itself. And I think just overall it's a fun story. There's a very obvious good and evil, which makes it easy to follow. Both movies tackle deism a lot. The first one, from the commentaries I've heard, tackles a lot of Christian beliefs as there being one God, one creator, whereas the sequel to it, Tron Legacy, tackles more of a Buddhist approach, from what I understand. But that being said, if you're going to watch either of them for the graphics, watch the second. If you're going to watch either of them for the plot, I would say watch the first. Sadly, we're not getting a third Tron anytime soon, so can't comment about that, except that I'm upset. But it's a movie that is something that I can't necessarily rewatch it over and over like most of the movies on my list, but it's one that, like, I kind of hold near and dear to like my movie viewing experience. Just because I think it encapsulates what a good story should be. I still think, like, when it comes to stories, my favorite story has always been Bionicle, I think. But I think this sets up a good story of a hero that isn't from... It's almost like a superhero story in that each character has, like, a different skill set than human beings do. But it's a tale of adventure and fun, and it's sci-fi, and it has a hero plot to it. Yeah. I just love it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, and it doesn't really appeal to me. It doesn't really attract me very much to it. I know a lot of people love it. They loved how visual it was, but for me, the visuals, they look pretty, but they don't really attract me at all, so I don't know if I'll be seeing it anytime soon.
I just recently rewatched the second one, Tron Legacy, and there's a lot of criticism of it, but it's just so visually rich. And then it also has these like really good themes of fatherhood, as you have Flynn with his sort of 3 kids, quote unquote kids. The kid he abandoned, the kid he raised incorrectly, and then the kid who he's trying to do right with.
Right.
And it talks also a lot about like this idea of removing yourself from the equation. Is that really a good philosophy? Does that improve anything? But beyond that, I mean, mostly the biggest reason to watch it is because it's just so visually cool.
That and the soundtrack.
Yes.
Amazing. Daft Punk.
Soundtrack and visuals are just incredible, and they still hold up, and for the most part, I mean, Clue is a little bit iffy, but...
Yeah.
You know, it's just so well made, and you have these, like, incredible sets, and you watch the behind the scenes, and they actually made the light up costumes, and I watched that when I was pretty young, and I remember being really excited about it, and then when I rewatched it, it was, I thought, I was just young, so I liked it because I was young, but now I won't, but I actually really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should get through our honorable mentions. So for me, honorable mention would be Forrest Gump. I really love the story. I just loved how Forrest Gump, he's not the smartest person out there. Basically dumb, but stupid is what stupid does. But I love how, while he may not be the smartest person out there, he's probably one of the luckiest, where in the end, the whole story where people who were smarter than him, they end up having a miserable life, while he doesn't really know it. He's had the best life, where he ends up with he has a kid, he has a wife, a good house, lots of money. He would probably be the ideal person, essentially. Another thing I would say would be that the Alien franchise, especially the first 2 movies, they're well done. I really love them. And basically anything I did not mention on my list here. Like specifics, when I categorize Batman and Star Wars, anything that I didn't mention there would be honorable mentions.
Right.
I'll
go ahead and do mine.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the superhero genre when it comes to movies and TV shows, so most of mine are going to be in that category. Captain America Civil War is probably my favorite Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Or at least released by Marvel, in that it's just a really fun team superhero movie, but it has a deeper aspect to it. Logan is a really good, realistic-ish superhero movie that just very well done. I enjoyed Batman vs. Superman, and that I know a lot of people I've heard a couple complaints about Batman and Superman being, like there should be a rivaling thoughts going from one side to another, and similar to the way Civil War did it. But I think the whole story was to show how similar Batman and Superman and all the other heroes actually were. And I think to that degree it did a good job. Was it the best movie? No. Could they have done better? Yes. But was it a bad movie? I wouldn't say it was a bad movie. I enjoyed it a lot. Wonder Woman was also a good movie, though they completely botched all of Greek mythology. It was a good movie. As for animated superhero movies, the ones that came to my head were The Incredibles and Big Hero 6. And especially for Big Hero 6, I enjoyed it because it was one of the few superhero movies that I wasn't expecting to be a superhero movie and just kind of became one. And I think it did a really good job there. My last ones are a little bit weird, I guess. Well, not necessarily, but The Martian I really loved. Good humor, but good tension the whole way through. And, okay, the last ones are the real weird ones. I really liked Ender's Game, the movie. Haven't read the book. Probably will not read the book because I've heard it's different from the movie, and I really did enjoy the movie. The Giver was also a movie that I really enjoyed.
No.
And I did read the book, and I enjoyed the movie more than the book.
No.
Partially because I like the visuals. The actors were good. I don't know. It does the Wizard of Oz thing where it starts in black and white and proceeds to color, and I think that's a fun thing that most movies can't do naturally.
Yeah.
But I really did enjoy it. And then lastly, but probably closest to being on my list, is the movie Sky High. And the reason why I like it is because it's a cheesy superhero movie, which fits into my interests. But at the same time, the whole story revolves around this kid trying to fit into his parents' shoes, especially in a school setting. And for me, that relates being a school kid. Most people know me by my parents. So that was something that I could relate to. And then at the same time, it was just a fun experience that, while like the third act of the movie gets really cheesy, the first two acts of it are, they're good. And for a low budget Disney movie, I think it did well.
Okay, I'll just quickly, for the sake of time, go through mine. The Grand Budapest Hotel, that movie, it's the type of movie you sit down with a cup of tea and just sort of enjoy, laugh at. Cloud Atlas, which is really epic, large scale, covers 6 different stories across time. But if you plan on watching it, read the novel or the Wikipedia summary, otherwise you will be lost. Most critics agree that the movie is ambitious, but they couldn't tell what was going on. Then Inglourious Bastards, which is my favorite Tarantino movie. It's a hilarious movie, really good satire, compares its audience to Hitler. And then Mad Max Fury Road. It's just so much artistry. I suggest you watch the black and white version. It adds a little bit by taking out the color. And finally, Fargo. If you like dark comedy, you will be laughing out loud at some of the darkest comedy you can find in movies. Yeah.
Okay. So is that everything?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it was a fun time. Thank you guys for watching, and then we all see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.